Welcome back, and in this video we will be talking about ES6 classes. ES6 classes are very important in React, especially because we will be using ES6 classes in components. That will be in the next video. I will show you how this ES6 classes are implemented in components. So, and again we will go back here, Control A, Control C, or you can cut, and we'll be putting this in another folder, or you can go ahead and delete it. This is just for future reference. So right click, new file, and call this as event.js and save it here, and let's close this. Now come back to index.js and save it. This should be real. So it's all clear. Go back to console. Alright. So the goal of using classes is to reuse code. We are going to define a class which is basically like a blueprint, and we will be able to make multiple instances of that class. So it's like a real blueprint. Example, when I have a blueprint of a building which was very hard to build, now I can use this blueprint to build several other buildings very easily. So if I have a blueprint of the building which I built first, I can just build many of those, but with different rooms, or many other different rooms, or different kind of an architecture. I can modify it, but the basic blueprint, the base, is same. So let us kick things off by using the class keyword. So let's say class and user. So a class should always have a capital, the name of the class should always start with a capital letter, and open the brackets and close the brackets. Now you've created your ES6 class. So we have a completely valid class. We can create an instance of this user. We can then see what it exactly contains. So let's go ahead and create an instance of user. So that's const user1 is equal to new user, semicolon, and let's log this out. So that's user1, and let's save this. Now here, if you can see, we can see that we have an instance of user and the class that we're building it on. So this is an instance of user and the class that we're building it on. We also have an empty object right here. It's an empty object right here. We would see our info in these brackets with an inside if there is any info. So let's go ahead and put some info into it. Let's call this as John Doe, and let's save this. We should be seeing it here, but nothing happens right here because we have given it some value. Now we have passed this data in, but we are not using it anywhere. We haven't used this anywhere. We've just passed the data in. So if we are calling a function here, how exactly do we access that data? To do this, we will be defining the constructor function for the user class. Now what is a constructor? The constructor function, it's a function. So constructor is a function that gets called when we create a new instance. So as soon as we create, constructor function is called. So then it gets called, and with all the arguments we pass in it. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is how you use the constructor function. It's just constructor, open brackets, and then open the curly brackets, and let's log something out. Let's say testing for now, and go ahead and save this. Now you can say test, you can see testing here. That is because, so when an instance is called, the constructor function is called instantly. Now we do not want to make changes to the user class as a whole, but to the individual instance of user. So this is the individual instance of user, and we want to make changes to that alone. To do that, we have to use the this keyword. So I hope you know what this keyword is. So to do that, we need to use this, and it's a reference to the class instance. Now if you don't know what this keyword is, I will explain what this does, and we've used it earlier as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So remove console.log, and let's pass the argument. So it takes from here, so that's name. This dot name is equal to name. So save that, and you will see name John Doe. The argument has been passed successfully. This refers to the class instance. Now this person has a unique name. This keyword refers to the instance of the class and not the class itself. It refers to the instance of the class. So this can be used when we want to refer to an instance of the class and not the class itself. We can also create many instances of user class. So let's go ahead and do that. Const user2, this is an instance 2. I'm creating another instance of user, and we have to use the new keyword when we want to create an instance. And let's call this, and let's log that. Now if we don't have to make any changes to this, and we can save this, and it will show us that John Doe and Phil are the two instances. It doesn't, this is the user and these two are instances. So John Doe and Phil is shown in the arguments. Now we can set up default arguments if we want to, and I will show you how to do that. These are if there is no argument to this particular thing. So let's remove Phil. We are not passing any argument to the user, to the instance. So let's give it default name. So what does this do? Now I have given an argument here, and when this dot name to the name gets the constructor is passed, it uses John Doe. Now what if I'm not given any argument? Then what? So then I can set up a default value, and that will get displayed. So let's go ahead and save that, and you can see that John Doe is the argument that we passed, and anonymous is the default argument that we have passed to the constructor. I hope you understood that. Now we can also define a method with any name and function, and it will run if we explicitly call it. Now let's create a function. So we'll create a function here and explicitly call that. The method would be, let's give it some space. Okay, so get greeting and let it return hello. So let's go ahead and call it explicitly, that is the get greeting method, and let's save it. And here you see hello. That is what the instance of the user class, when logged, calls this function and returns that hello is the return value. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and say hello, I am, plus concatenate and say this start name. We can do this. We can use the start name because it's inside the scope, and it will be using this value, the argument that we have passed. Now let's go ahead and save that. So it is going to say hello, I am John Doe. We can do the same thing here and call the get greeting method. Since we are not passing any argument, it should say hello, I am anonymous. So let's save that. And yes, it does. It says hello, I am anonymous. So I hope you understood how this keyword works, and this is very important because we'll be using it a lot. Now we can make it simpler by using the ES6 template string, which allows us to create better string. So instead of saying return hello I am, you can put the quotes and the plus and everything. Go ahead, remove this, and we'll use something called backticks, and it is on the left side of your keyboard, just above tab and before the number 1 you can see backticks. So we will be using backticks. Alright, and I am going to say hello, I am, and then the dollar, open the brackets and close it, this dot name. This is completely valid and it works. So let's save it, and it's still hello I am John Doe and hello I am anonymous. So there are different ways to do it, and this is one of the ways, and this is what we'll be using. It's quite simple. Let's go ahead and create another method, and we'll be using the method for these instances. So let's say get info, and we'll put our age in there, and return. So we'll be using backticks itself, and let's say this dot name is this dot age, and we'll create the age, we'll pass the argument, and we'll give it a default value as well. So dollar, open the brackets, this dot name is dollar, open the brackets, this dot age, we have not defined it yet and we will do it, years old. Now we'll go from the back this time. So if we want to get this dot age, we will have to get it from the instance, so we'll use this to refer to the instance. So this dot age is equal to age, and we should give it some default value, or we don't have to, but we'll go ahead and do that. The default age shall be 0, and let's call it, let's log it out, console.log user 1 dot get info. We'll do the same thing. Okay, let's save it and see if it works. And it does work. It says hello, I am John Doe. John Doe is 0 years old because we did not give any input to it. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can pass the argument here, comma, let's say 40. So let's save that, and John Doe is 40 years old. I hope you can see it, and we'll do the same for the next one. We'll go ahead and log it out, but this time we'll be using the default values for this, so we will not pass any arguments here. Let's say user 2 dot get info. We'll save this, and here we go. This should be your output, and this is what we learned. We learned how to use this keyword and how to pass methods, how to call the methods, and we also learned how to use the instances of the class. Alright. So let's go ahead and override class. So let's create another class that extends user, so we can use the properties of the parent class, that is this. So we can use the methods, we can use the variables that we have declared. We can use all this data in another class because it will be extending its parents class. So this is the child class. Now let's create some space here and let's create a class called employee which extends user. Employee, and let's create an instance for this. So let's, instead of user, we will be saying employee. So we'll be creating an instance of employee. Now let's do that here as well. And I want to pass these two parameters. If you can see, these two arguments which are coming from the parent class, and I want to include another argument of my own which will be here in the child class. So an SSN number, that's 2345, and let's call it here. And how do we do that? We have to create a constructor, obviously, and let's create a constructor and let's give name. These are the arguments, and this will be coming from here, and we'll see how it takes the input from here, and it just cannot just like come from here to here. So we'll see how to get those values, name and this dot name and this dot age. So name, age, and SSN. Open and close the brackets. Alright, so this dot SSN. So let's first create this dot SSN is equal to SSN. Now this is referring to the instance of the child class, right? So this was coming from the child class instance. Now what about these two arguments, John Doe and his age 40? These are here. How do we get those values here? It's quite simple, because this is the child class. We can always get properties from here, as I said earlier. Now to do that, we'll have to use something called the super keyword. So super refers to its parent class, and in this case it's user. This is basically like using the user constructor, the user's constructor values up above. So by using super, we'll just be using the constructor's values. So let's go ahead and say super, and what are the two variables that we want? It's values, that is name and age. It's as simple as that to get values from here to here, and that's it. That's all is what you need to do. Let's go ahead and save it and see if it works. It's not giving us any error but it is showing us the same value. So the reason is we never called any method. We are just using the previous methods. We're using these, and we can do that because this is an instance of the child class, and this is the child of this parent. So we can obviously use the method here, and that is brilliant actually. Now we will be displaying all the three values here. So for that we'll have to create a method. Now if we want to add methods, we can do that as well, but make sure they have unique names. If we have the same names as get greeting and the same thing, we'll get an error. But the same thing like what happened right now, we were trying to display SSN and we're calling the previous functions. Now that'd be an error because it shows the same thing. Now so let's do that. Let's go ahead and create a method. Let's call it as SSN. So that will be the method as SSN, and or we can just call it as SSN number. That would be better. So let's do that. Let's return. Now if we use the same function name, then obviously we'll be getting an error and we'll be displaying the previous parent's value because the child's value's priority will be less than the parent's value. Now let's go ahead and change this to SSN number, and we can remove the rest. Let's save this, and yes, it is returning hello and hello, so that's coming from the child class. Now let's go ahead and see if we can get the get info. So that is basically method overriding. So now if we want to use get info from the parent class, we can do something like this. Okay, let's override the method get info. So before we do this, before we make any changes to before overriding the method, let's first make the changes to this. Put the backticks and say my SSN is $, open the brackets and say this dot SSN. Alright, that's cool. Now here in get info, we want to override the parent class method. So let's include both. So let's info equals to super dot get info. Now what is this doing? Now I want the information or whatever the value this method has here, and I want to add my own. So that's why I'm using super, just as we did before for the constructor function. We are just using super for get info to get value from get info in the parent class. Now let's go ahead and concatenate both. So now I am going to include this value that is stored in info, and I am going to put my own value by concatenate. So backticks and say my SSN is $, open brackets and close the brackets, this dot SSN, and we'll have to call this or return this method actually. So let's return info. Now let's use the method here and let's call it. So console.log user1 dot get info, and let's call this method. Now I hope you can see the arguments clearly, and we're calling get info. We'll call it for this one as well. So let's copy paste this. And we'll save this. Alright, so here it says my SSN is 2345. That is coming from the first console.log from this, and the second one says John Doe is 40 years old. My SSN is 235. So let me just fix this up. I'm just going to remove this because I want to focus on overriding the method, so it will be simpler for you to see it. And I want to put a space here because there's no space here, so it's kind of confusing. So user2 is, what is the warning? User2 is assigned but never used. Oh, I'm so sorry. So that is good. Okay. Now John Doe is 40 years old. My SSN is 235. 2345. Sorry. And Anonymous is 0 years old. My SSN is undefined because I haven't specified any argument here, that is default argument I have. So it says undefined. I can't give a default SSN, so I don't want to give a default SSN, so let it be undefined. And I think hopefully you understood what I was trying to say. And this is basically overriding, getInfo is overriding its parents method. That's it. And we're just adding our own things, and we're just using this .ssn to use the value from this child class, and that's about it. So all these concepts are very important in the further lessons, especially when we are doing components. We'll be using this, we'll be using class, we'll be using extents, we'll be using constructors, and it is super, all this is super important. And I'll see you in the next video.